All right, after the commitment that Pitt picked up over the weekend, the Panthers are sitting at 12 commitments in the recruiting class of 2025. They've got a dozen. How much more they're going to add? Where do they stand? What do we make of this class? Let's take stock of things as it stands right now with the 2025 recruiting class, the 12 recruits that Pitt has committed, and who else they might add to fill out this class. Let's break down the class. Let's do a little class recap. And like I say, take stock of the recruiting class right here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, this is something we kind of like to do. I don't know. I mean, I think we did one last week after they got all the commitments over the weekend. Figure we do it again now that they got a commitment over this past weekend. And each time they sort of have a run of commitments or get a new commitment, it's always good to sort of reset reset the class, talk about where they're at, what they've got, what they need, what they're going to get, who else they're after, and what else is sort of hanging out there, and who else they might be looking for. To fill out the class. So I thought we could do that today with the recruiting class of 2025 here on the Tuesday edition of the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and that way you get all of our Pitt video content. Whether it's these daily Morning Pitt videos, our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, interviews, press conferences, highlights, whatever it might be. We do it all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And of course, the main site, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the place to get all of your Pitt sports coverage. Pitt football, basketball, recruiting, you find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to hang out and interact with hundreds and thousands of other Pitt fans. Pitt fans have had a mixed reaction, although maybe it's not all that mixed, to the newest commitment. We talked about him yesterday on the show, committed on Saturday. Akram El-Nagmi, British guy, offensive line prospect, big, 6'6", 295 pounds, from Bristol, former rugby player and all that. We've got articles on him on Panther-Lair.com. Got a chance to catch up with him actually very early yesterday morning, it was like 7:30 for me, and it was like 12:30 in the afternoon for him. So it kind of worked out well as far as the timing. There aren't many recruiting interviews you can do at 7:30 in the morning, but if they are 5 hours ahead, then it works out okay. So anyway, we got that online at Panther-Lair.com. You can read about Akram right there. But where does that leave the recruiting class? They've got 12 recruits committed right now. We understand sort of the caveat that always comes this time of year is, if they have 12 recruits committed, they'll probably, ultimately sign 9 of the guys that they have committed. It's what it's become. There have always been decommitments. I think in the last 6 years since they started having the June official visits, there have been even more decommitments. I think you've seen it become just sort of a regular part of the process. It's almost kind of built in. I don't think you would necessarily want to say that you're counting on it. But it's probably likely going to happen. I don't think the coaches take a certain number thinking, well, we want to sign 21, so we'll take 24 commitments because we know at least 3 are going to decommit. I don't think they necessarily approach it like that, but you do understand that you're probably going to have some other options available in the event that you lose a linebacker or a receiver or DB or whatever it may be. And we've seen Pitt have to deal with that every year. I mean, you go back to the first year of the June official visits, that was like Brandon Mack and Kadri Jackson. Remember those guys? I forget if there was anybody else who committed that first year. T. Denson, maybe, I think might have been that first year as well. They all ended up decommitting. The next year, Henry Parrish was committed. We talked about him recently because he's back at Ole Miss. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. You saw it happen last year as well. It's year after year that you're going to have these guys who were committed on the official visits, and they end up decommitting. So they have 12 commitments right now. They'll probably sign 9 or 10 of these guys, and I have no idea who's going to flip. I have no idea who they're going to lose. It's just sort of understood that they'll probably lose somebody. But let's talk about what they've got in terms of the 12 guys so far. We talked about this a little bit yesterday with Akram El-Nagmi committing. He's the second offensive line prospect in the class. He's an offensive tackle prospect. He joined Shep Turk, who's an offensive guard prospect, or an interior offensive line prospect from Thomas Jefferson. So it's 2 offensive linemen in the class right now. I think they'll try to get 2 more, and I think they want to sort of match what they've gotten already. I think they want to take 4 offensive linemen in this class, 2 guards and 2 tackles. And yeah, they signed 5 offensive linemen last year. I'm really of the mind, and I think most coaches would probably say something similar, that you can never really have too many offensive linemen. That's a position you should probably attempt to over-recruit every year, unless you're facing a very small recruiting class that you're only going to be able to sign 15 guys, in which, and you might have some other big needs that you need to address. But if you're going over 20 recruits, you should probably have at least 4 offensive linemen every year. You need to build that depth. We talked yesterday about how it's one of the tougher positions to project, and so you're dealing with that as well, that some guys aren't going to pan out. And you need 5 of them on the field at all times. You need 5 of them on the field at all times, and you probably are going to need 6 or 7 or 8 throughout a season, just due to injuries and guys having to miss time. And you look over the past 4 or 5 years for Pitt, I don't think they've had a single year where they've had less than 7 offensive linemen play a lot of snaps. I mean, there's injuries every year. It's a high collision part of the of the game. It's a high collision area of the game every snap, and you're going to lose guys. And so you need those numbers to be big. Of any position group on the team, you need your offensive line numbers to be big. And so taking 4 the year after they took 5, I mean, I think that's absolutely the right move. And next year they should take 4 or 5 again. If they're going to sign 20 recruits, I think you do dedicate 20 to 25% of those scholarships to offensive linemen, just because that's 5 out of your 22 starting positions, right? If you start 22 guys, 5 of them are offensive linemen. So it only makes sense if you're going to sign 22, then 5 should probably be offensive linemen. There are some flaws in that logic, but let's not dwell on it too long. I will say this, though, about Shep Turk, and I actually made this point on Twitter yesterday, and I think I put it out on the message boards, and I think it bears stating, because I think it's important to know about this class. Shep Turk, the offensive lineman from Thomas Jefferson, when we've interviewed him, he's a man of few words. He doesn't like to go in depth on too many things. He's sort of straight and to the point. Doesn't really mess around. Doesn't get elaborate too much. But from what we've heard, though, when he's around the other recruits, when he's around the players, he's very outgoing, he's very effusive, and he's something of a recruiter in this class. I've been told there's 2 guys in this recruiting class who are really emerging as leaders for the class, recruiters for the class, trying to help build the class themselves and put in that work. One is Shep Turk, and the other is Mason Heinschel, the quarterback commitment from Oregon, Ohio. Not Oregon the state, Oregon the town in the state of Ohio. Heinschel committed to Pitt in March, and he's the first quarterback commitment in this class. We say first because it looks like the staff is still considering taking 2 quarterbacks. We'll talk about that in a second. But Heinschel and Turk have really, from everything we've heard, been very active with the other recruits. I think Heinschel took his official visit on the first weekend. Turk came in this past weekend. And Heinschel really tried to ingratiate himself with the rest of the recruits, really tried to work on getting those guys to join him at Pitt. And I think Shep Turk this past weekend did the same thing. Even when I talked to Akram El Nagmi, I was asking him, what other recruits did you hang out with? He's like, oh, Shep, he's great. Shep was talking to me so much through the whole visit and stuff like that. I think it's interesting to know who's sort of emerging as a leader for this recruiting class, and it looks like it's those 2 guys, Heinschel and Turk. As far as taking 2 quarterbacks, I think that still seems to be the plan. Pitt coaches are still saying that to recruits. There was a guy they had at their camp over this past weekend, Bo Jackson. He's a big quarterback prospect from Michigan, 6'3", 200 pounds, 210 pounds. And I say big, I mean literally. He's got a lot of size. When you watch him throw, when I saw him throw at the prospect camp, you could see it that he was a big guy, a big athlete, and really able to move well and had a really good arm. Not a ton of offers, mostly just some MAC offers, but he's a guy who's on the coaching staff's radar. And quite frankly, if you're going to take a second quarterback, you could do worse than a guy who's 6'3", 210 with a pretty strong arm. And Bo Jackson from West Bloomfield, Michigan, he looks the part of a 6'3", 210-pound athlete with a good arm. So, you'd love to add a 4-star prospect and the Elite 11 guy to go with Mason Heinschel, but if you get Heinschel and a guy like Bo Jackson, and I don't know if they'll, and it's Bo, it's Beau. I keep saying Bo Jackson, and it's making me think of the other Bo Jackson. But if you got a guy like that, I mean, I think that would be a really nice compliment as a guy you can bring in and grow and develop. Now, I'll say this about Mason Heinschel. If Pitt ends up only getting Heinschel in this class, I think they're going to be in pretty good shape. He looked really, really good at Pitt's camp on Sunday. Just dropping a lot of dimes all over the place. Misfired on a few 7-on-7 passes where he underthrew guys a little bit. Some of that is trying to get the timing down. You know, you're working in together at a camp for the first time. Probably never threw to these guys before. Doesn't have any practice really working with them. They don't have practice working with him. They don't know what his throws look like. He doesn't know where they're going to have a step or when they're going to cut or this kind of thing or that kind of thing. But on the whole, he looked really good. I was really impressed. I wasn't sure what to make of Heinschel, but watching him throw in person, I was really impressed, and I think he's going to be really good. Yeah, he'll be a good quarterback for Pitt to get in this class. You move on through the class. You know, you look at skill guys. Tony Kinsler, kind of a running back, slot back maybe. Demarion Folks and Jakarian Turner and Bryce Yates, probably receivers, although there's some versatility in that group as well. They're all sort of the same. They're all right around 5'10", 5'11", 165, 170 pounds. They're all sort of built the same. And there were even some wide receiver recruits like Deshaun Lanier and Cameron Flowers, guys who have Pitt offers at their prospect camp on Sunday. And they're like the same kind of guy. They're built the same. Different skill sets. Not everybody's exactly the same, but built kind of the same. And, you know, right now with the 3 receivers they've got committed plus Tony Kinsler, it seems like they're intent to sort of hold off a little bit on a couple more of these guys who are sort of built the same. And I think they might want to find some guys who are maybe a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit of size. You know, you look at the official visit list, potential visits this weekend for, Emmanuel Taylor, a wide receiver who's about 6'2". Gianni Contosis is more like a 6'1". He's a little bit bigger, so potential there. And it seems like they might be holding out a little bit to see what they can do with a different type of receiver. But like we've talked about, I think they're going to take a big receiver class. I think they'll take 4 receivers in this class, even though they just signed 4 receivers 2 classes ago. But one of those guys is already gone. They only signed 2 last year. And as we talked about, you look at the recruiting classes, I think 2020 through 22, so 3 recruiting classes, they have 1 guy on the roster from those classes. One scholarship wide receiver. And it's Che Wabuko in the 2022 class. Everybody else is gone. Now, potentially, the 2020 class, those guys could still be here. But that class was Jordan Addison and Joe and Barton. 2021, you have like Jaden Bradley and I forget who else they signed in that class. Miles Alston or somebody, I think. 22, Che Wabuko and Addison Copeland. They took a lot of 2-man classes, and those classes have pretty much all washed out. And so there's a very big need for numbers at wide receiver. And so even though they took 4, in last year's class, the 23 class with Kenny Johnson and Lamar Seymour and Zion Fowler-El and Izzy Polk, that group is already down to 3 after Izzy Polk transferred this offseason. And they only took 2 in the subsequent class with Cameron Montero and Tyreek Robinson coming in as freshmen this year. So it's not hard to understand why they want a bigger recruiting class. It's not hard to understand why they would want to take 4 guys or 5 guys in this class and keep trying to rebuild the ranks. I think they'll take at least, or try to take at least, 1 more wide receiver commitment and see what they're able to do there. Tight end, they have Max Hunt. He committed, last weekend I think it was. Could see them standing pat with that. Kind of depends on what they think of, the tight end they signed this past year as a true freshman, and kind of what they think of the depth there overall. They don't have a lot of numbers at tight end. They just don't have a lot of numbers. There have been a lot of empty classes, a lot of washed out classes, a lot of transfers who didn't pan out. And so they're going to have to keep finding ways to restock that group. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do it out of the recruiting class, or with high school recruits, or if they're going to have to keep trying to go the transfer well. But they're going to have to rebuild that spot. And I'm not sure. I think they've got a ways to go. So that's like 8 recruits on offense out of the 12 commitments they have so far. Only 4 are committed on defense. There's 2 defensive linemen, Juju Anderson, a defensive end, and Trevor Summers, a defensive tackle. Summers committed in February. Anderson committed last weekend. And then they also got Justin Thompson, a linebacker, last weekend. And Elijah Dotson, a safety from Detroit, committed in May. He's going to take his official visit this weekend. A few thoughts there. I think they want multiple additional defensive linemen. At least one more end and one more tackle. I think they want at least one more linebacker, potentially 2. They had a pretty good one in Bryson Williams on campus over the weekend. He liked Pitt a lot, but he's going to go to Michigan State. He's a kid from Michigan. That's a little bit of a concern. But I think they'd like to get him to go with Justin Thompson. And then you have a really good linebacker group, I think. That they could add to with one more guy or stand pat after taking some bigger linebacker classes over the last 2 years. And then defensive back, they're always going to try and load up on defensive backs. We talked about how they had 3 DBs visit over the weekend. They haven't, they're still working on those guys, trying to get commitments from those guys, and we'll see what sort of comes out of that. But I think when you look throughout the defense with 4 guys committed now, I think they'll add at least 2 more defensive linemen, at least 1 linebacker, and at least 2 DBs. So that's 5 more. That would get them up to 9 guys on defense. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up with 10 or 11 defensive prospects in this recruiting class. If they do that, I think I always assumed this class was going to push past 20. I assumed that they would take a bigger recruiting class. I honestly don't see much upside in taking smaller classes unless you think you're really going to have a lot of success in the transfer portal. I think you got to load up every year because you're going to have attrition. You're going to have spots come open. And we may be not that far away from having unlimited scholarship spots anyway. You know what I mean? Like unlimited scholarships, but 100-man restriction on the roster. But all 100 can be on scholarship, or all 110, or all 90, however many they end up having. And so I think you load up on high school kids. If you find players that fit your system, that you believe you can coach up and you can develop, go get them, bring them in, bring in as many as you can, and see who shakes out. See who works out and ends up being a good player for you. And, cast a wide net. It doesn't mean you have to lower your standards, but if you have a good player out there, if you have a good linebacker and you already got 2 linebackers, but there's this one other guy you really like, take him. You might as well take him because, you're going to have the space. With the way the transfers are working, with the way attrition is happening, and with the way the rosters might get expanded anyway. Take the extra guy. And I think they'll take the extra guy in this class and probably get 22, 23, 24, 25 recruits in this class. I think it'll be another big class. And it should be. There's no reason to go small in this recruiting class. So we'll see what this last official visit weekend brings. We'll, of course, have lots of coverage of it heading into the weekend for you on Panther-Lair.com and, of course, right here on YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Lots of recruiting coverage to get you ready for the final official visit weekend of the summer. Probably going to bring a bunch of commitments. So you're going to see that commitment list grow. And then, of course, throughout this week and next week and the week after, there'll probably be more commitments that come in for Pitt from guys who visited these last 2 weekends, guys who were intent on taking all of their visits. And then once they conclude those visits, they're thinking about what schools they want to go to, and some of them are going to pick Pitt. So we'll see that commitment list continue to grow, and we'll have coverage of all of it right there at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. As always, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content right here on the YouTubes. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Appreciate it. Hope you had a great Monday. Hope you're staying as cool as possible. Stay hydrated, man. Hydration is the key. And remember, you hydrate today so you can feel good tomorrow. All right? It's not something you can just do right now and make yourself like, oh, I'm so thirsty, and you drink a lot of water, and now I'm hydrated. No. You plan it for tomorrow, okay? So drink a lot of water today. Drink half your weight in ounces, right? You weigh 200 pounds, drink 100 ounces of water. This has been your infomercial, your little PSA here at the end of the Morning Pit. So thanks for tuning in today. Stay dry, stay cool, and stay hydrated. And we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.